guys, Prowl 1701 here, and the video today we're going to talk about is which Doctor do you think was the most underappreciated in their time? So while their era was the current era, which one, looking back on it, are you like, that Doctor was definitely the most appreciated? That Doctor should have got more attention at the time. I do think there are several to choose from. Now, we're not going to look at Whittaker because I don't feel like we're far enough removed from her era, with it having just ended a couple years ago. I don't really think that's been long enough to reassess. But we are going to look at some of the other Doctors. Of course, there's several Doctors who were hugely popular in their time, so there's no reason to talk about those. We know Tennant was popular. We know Tom Baker, John Pertwee, etc. But we're going to look at some of the Doctors that maybe didn't get the best praise while they were the Doctor and look back on it and go, were they really treated unjustly? Were they better than they were given credit? Were they underappreciated in their time? And I think several Doctors, all of the 80s Doctors, all of them. The 5th Doctor, especially having to follow in the steps of Tom Baker, that's no easy task. I feel like the 5th Doctor, perhaps at the time, might not have gotten the love that he should have. I mean, he is kind of on the lower scale of my Doctors, but he does have some really good stories. And a lot of his stories, even if they're not masterpieces, are still good. I enjoy them. Season 20 is the perfect example of that. I mean, it has some great stories, but it's not necessarily anything Caves of Androzani Earthshock value. But still really good stories with no bad stories in there. And a lot of his stories to me are like that. He has a few like masterpiece scale stories, a few bad stories, but a lot of his are good. Some of them just serviceably good, but very few bad stories. There's very few The Awakenings in there. Even Black Orchid, which doesn't do much for me, he's still fine, in my opinion. The 6th Doctor especially. The 6th Doctor definitely, I feel like, was underappreciated. Now, part of that, I think the perception of the 6th Doctor has been helped out by Big Finish later. I do think Big Finish has done a lot to redeem the 6th Doctor. But looking at even his TV stuff, I feel like he's a little underappreciated. He's rough around the edges, let's be honest. And again, his Doctor never really got time to develop. They really wanted his Doctor to be like layers of an onion, peeling it away. And he never really got that, with only really getting 2 seasons to work with. And while I consider Trial the weakest of the classic seasons, it's still not a bad season. It's just kind of, I like 3 of the 4 stories in it. But season 22 is severely underrated, and I feel like the Doctor has great moments in all of those. He's really helped in season 22 by just some really good stories. But he does a good job of selling those stories, and he has some truly iconic moments in the Trial of the Time Lord, like when he tells off the Time Lords at the end. That's great. So I definitely feel like Colin's underappreciated in his time. More so for me is McCoy. McCoy definitely underappreciated in his time. By the time he got on the show was kind of on life support. We'd already had the hiatus. I always feel like the show never fully recovered from the hiatus. I feel like after season 22, the show was kind of limping along on life support. Like it never quite got the attention it deserved, especially being put opposite Coronation Street. And that the show was clinging to life, fighting for life those last 4 seasons. Which is insane to me because seasons 25 and 26 are very good seasons. I feel like there's a lot of Doctor Who fans out there that just don't know what they're missing, especially younger fans who watch mostly the modern series that might give the McCoy era a pass for the most part. They don't know what they're missing. Seasons 25 and 26 are very good. And I like season 24. Season 24 to me is underrated. I think Paradise Towers is absolutely fantastic. I think Dragonfire is really good. And I can appreciate Time in the Ronnie for what it is, knowing all of the behind-the-scenes stuff. Really, it's just Delta holding that season down for me. I feel like it's underrated. But seasons 25 and 26 are very good. Season 25, Silver Nemesis might be a little weak. I argue that Greatest Show in the Galaxy is a little weak, but it gets progressively better throughout its story. But Remembrance of the Daleks is very good, and the Happiness Patrol is also very good. 2 masterpiece stories. Season 26, you have, of course, Battlefield, which is good. Bad incidental music, but good. Survival, perhaps a little overrated because it's the final story. But then you have Ghostlight and Curse of Fenric, which also, to me, are masterpieces. I love them both. And McCoy is just good in the role. Now, his range as an actor is a little limited at times, which comes across, like when he goes into that fake voice I've talked about before. But there's also a lot of times he absolutely nails what he's going for and does it really well. Like the conversation he has when he dares the guy to shoot him in the Happiness Patrol, and his speech in Battlefield at the end is very good. I just feel like his Doctor was unappreciated just because so many people had tuned out by the late 80s. So many people were just, well, it's not as good as it used to be. That I feel like at the time, even though, again, being an American, I wasn't there in the UK when this was airing at the time, but I always feel like, looking back, that the Seventh Doctor didn't get the credit he was due. Now, the number one on my list, and I can speak on this more because I was there, is got to be Peter Capaldi. I feel like the 12th Doctor, definitely in the past few years since he has left the role, the 12th Doctor, I feel like has just grown in popularity. I know there are plenty of people who've always liked him, but to where I think he rivals Tennant for the number one modern Doctor with a lot of people. You know, for a long time, Tennant was basically the modern Who equivalent of Tom Baker. That was just the one you thought of when you thought of modern Doctor Who, more than likely. But I feel like Capaldi's neck and neck with him. I know several people that Capaldi is their favorite Doctor in the modern series or their favorite Doctor overall. There's plenty of people out there. You can look. Capaldi is their favorite Doctor. And I feel like at the time, there wasn't as much of this. Again, let's keep in mind that the show started to kind of die off in popularity during Capaldi's era, not Whittaker's era. It didn't hit that slowing down period in the Whittaker's era like some people try to remember it being. It's during the Capaldi era I noticed the popularity, especially here in the States, starting to wane. Because Doctor Who really did hit mainstream kind of around the very end of the Tennant era and through Matt Smith's era. It really kind of hit this peak popularity here where it kind of entered into the mainstream. You could have conversations about it with people in the street and it didn't feel weird. You didn't mind admitting you're a huge Doctor Who fan. I've mentioned on the channel before, I have a couple people I dated that part of the reasons we clicked and connected was we both watched Doctor Who at least, I'm trying to think, 2 or 3. 2 I can think of right off. So that's pretty impressive. And then during the Capaldi era is when it kind of started waning back down into kind of a niche thing here in the States. And I think part of it is I do think David Tennant and Matt Smith had a strong, younger female fan base. They had their little hot, cute doctors. And when Capaldi steps in, they're like, who's this old guy playing our doctor? Which is funny now, because nowadays I see plenty of women online that are just 12 stans. You know, that's daddy to them. I see stuff like that now, and I'm like, where were you guys 10 years ago? Or where were you gals 10 years ago? I think most of you have caught on by now that when I use the term guys, it's gender neutral. That's just my slang. It's just how I talk. When I say, hey guys, what's happening? It's not specifically saying, hey guys. It's just, hey everyone. That's just my slang. I'm sure most of you have caught on to that by now. But I feel like Peter Capaldi's just underserved because, again, I don't think people were expecting this older Doctor. It's really the first time Modern Who has done that, especially Modern Who since it got popular. It always kind of cast those younger, cuter Doctors, the action Doctors. And I feel like, especially Capaldi's personality, that whole am I a good man thing might have been a bad misstep too. Keep in mind that Capaldi is kind of in the middle of my Doctor list just because his type of Doctor isn't necessarily my type of Doctor. I'm more the Tom Baker, Patrick Troughton. Although I do like John Pertwee a lot too, and he is kind of more like, especially Series 10 Capaldi, to be fair, but I also have that nostalgic attachment to John too from my childhood, which also could be a factor there. Whereas Peter Capaldi, especially in Series 8, while I love some of Series 8, especially more so now, but even then I had several episodes I loved. But then I was also getting stuff like Listen, which I hated and still do. I got The Caretaker, which I don't really care for. I don't think it's complete rubbish, but I don't really care for it. And then I got Kill the Moon, which is just the worst, dumbest, stupidest Doctor Who episode ever made. One of the worst pieces of television ever made. Awful, with the Doctor acting so out of character in it. Then I also got to where I was just hating Clara at this point. And then the finale of the season was just a bit underwhelming for me. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, but it's just kind of, for me, it's not great. But it did have the other episodes in it kind of booing it. Then we got season 9, which is mostly just not good, to be honest. Heaven Sent is amazing. Peter Capaldi puts in a great performance in it. Hellbent took some time to grow on me. I don't think it's absolute rubbish, but it is disappointing coming off of Heaven Sent. As a companion piece to Heaven Sent, I find it disappointing. I don't think it's utter garbage, but I find it disappointing. Plus, it brings Clara back and practically makes her the Doctor, which makes me want to throw things. And then you also had the Under the Lake two-parter, which is very good. But most of the episodes, especially at the time, I did not care for. Now, I have reappraised Sleep No More a little more and found it fairly serviceable. Not great, but an enjoyable watch for every blue moon. But the Dalek two-parter is still my least favorite Dalek story. The two-parter with Game of Thrones girl in it doesn't really do much for me. It has a couple really nice moments in it. And there's a lot of the Capaldi era I can say that about. There's plenty of rubbish episodes with good moments in it. The Zygon two-parter is boring. Boring. But it has the speech. The speech is great. I'm not watching that two-parter to get the speech. I go on YouTube and just watch the speech. It's a great speech. Thank you, YouTube. And then I feel like I'm forgetting an episode in here somewhere. Was there another two-parter? I don't remember. Face the Raven is mostly garbage as well, except for the very end when Clara dies. That part's cool because Clara dies, and then Hellbent brings her back. You know, I'm sitting there with my Clara dies, you know, fan flag. But I feel like 12 was underappreciated in his time because he's such a different Doctor. Physically, his physical appearance being older, and characterization-wise, how his Doctor is characterized is so different. He's such a departure from David and Matt, which I think was the idea, because to get the modern audience used to the idea that the Doctor can be a very different person, personality-wise, when he regenerates. I just feel like it didn't work, and that's when you saw things wane. But it's been interesting seeing Capaldi get reappraised these past few years, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, bring Capaldi back! 16th Dr. Capaldi. There are people out there that would stand for that. They would love that. They would love to have Peter Capaldi come back. I don't think Peter Capaldi wants to come back. I always feel like Peter Capaldi is just way too much of a professional to say it, but I always feel like they pushed him and Moffat out the door because I feel like they wanted the show to get back to where it was during David and Matt's era, and they felt like Capaldi was a misstep. So they wanted to try something new. Force Awakens had come out, and this whole women's movement of having female protagonist characters, we were right at the beginning of that. So I think they were like, we're going to make the Doctor a woman, we're going to get Chris Chibnall because Broadchurch is great, and we're going to get back to our popularity. That didn't work. It worked that first episode. That first episode had like 10 million views because everybody was curious, and they certainly hyped it up with the marketing for the season. And then slowly over the season, it tapered off to where the show had some of the lowest viewing figures ever. But I always feel like that, because my understanding, at least hearing from what I hear on the internet, was that Capaldi had another year on his contract, and I think he would have loved to have done that. We all know Peter Capaldi's a huge Doctor Who fan. He always has been, even back in the day in classic series. He's a big Doctor Who fan. So it's probably a nice lifelong dream of him to play the Doctor. But I always wonder if he got to play his Doctor the way he wanted. Like, is the 12th Doctor the Doctor he wanted to play? I will always wonder that. I will always wonder if he got to play the Doctor how he wanted, if he got to play his version of the Doctor, or if he would have rather done something more like Tom or Patrick or Sylvester. I'm always curious about that. I'm always curious whether his leaving was his decision to leave, or for them to be like, so after this season, we're kind of going to go in another direction. Now, Peter Capaldi will never go on the record for that, I think, because he's too much of a professional. He's a classy fella. Absolutely love him. But I would love to know the behind the scenes about what was happening at the end of the Moffat era. And I definitely feel like the popularity that the 12th Doctor has and that Peter Capaldi has with a lot of the fandom now, I think justifies him as an actor, justifies the way he played the Doctor, and justifies his time on the show, despite, again, having some rough episodes. I did a breakdown of the Peter Capaldi episodes a while back, between like the bad, the okay, the good, the really good, and most of his episodes for me broke down between really not liking them and really liking them, with only a few, we're talking like 4 or 5, being middle ground stories for me. There were very few stories that were just straddling the middle of the line for him for me. Most of his stories I either strongly disliked or strongly liked. That's the Capaldi era for me. And I definitely feel like he was the most underappreciated in his time. And I love the fact that a lot of the fandom has woken up to him, and he's enjoying a resurgence in popularity now. I think that's pretty neat. So I want to know what you think of this video, and which Doctor do you think was the most underappreciated in their time on the show? Comment down below and let's talk about it. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support me on that. There's a link to that down in the description below. I want to give a shout out to Colin Coney and Sam Venning, two of my top tier patrons. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. It's very much appreciated. I also have a P.O. box. If there's anything you'd like to send me to look at and review, a link to my Amazon wishlist is down there. A link to my Amazon UK wishlist is also down there. Check those out. Most importantly, thank you for watching.